Hi there, Nigel Saunders for KW Bonsai. Today we're looking at my Portulacaria afra forest. This forest is styled to look like the African Baobab trees. And it's been 3 months since our last update on this forest, so it's been let grow since then, and it's time to do some maintenance to it. So today we're going to be doing some pruning, some cleaning up of the landscape, and we've got aphids on the tips, so we're going to take care of those. So here's a close-up of the aphids. If you see where my finger is, you can see the little bugs sucking the sap out of the trees. So most of those will get pruned off when we do our pruning, and then we'll give it a light spray with some soap and water just to take care of all the rest of them. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to start pruning up the forest. Okay, so we're going to start tackling the main tree first, and our objective is to get compact growth. So we're going to prune back to our first or second set of leaves depending on the direction of them, and we want to get movement. So every time we prune back a long straight branch, we're going to get subdividing, which will take one branch, it'll divide into two, so we'll get ramification, which is a high density of branches. So let's get started. I'm going to prune back to a horizontal pair of leaves, like so. And the top one here. And here we've got our first set of leaves. Back here we've got a strong shoot, so we're going to prune back quite far back to here. There's a leaf down there we're pruning back to. There's another strong shoot here, pruning back to the first set of leaves. Back again to the first set of leaves. Here we got some horizontal leaves, we're going to prune back to there, and back to here. Now we've got some strong growth at the back here, we're going to prune back to the first set of leaves again. That. And back here, we're just going to take the tip off. Here, take that off, tip off. So any branches that are growing in towards the tree, you want to remove. You want to keep all your branches fanning outwards. You want to keep your canopy in nice shape. So we're going to continue on with our directional pruning, do all the trees, and we'll come back. Okay, so I've got the trees pruned up as compact as I can get them, leaving at least 2 leaves from the new growth. So it'll cause each branch to subdivide from 1 into 2. The next step is to do some weeding. We've got some Scotch moss growing in here that we definitely want to get rid of. As I've said before, Scotch moss will create a layer of roots that even water has a hard time getting through. So you definitely want to get rid of your Scotch moss or your Irish moss. It's just a bad thing for bonsai trees. So we're going to do that next. We're going to get all our weeds out. So the next step is to clean up the moss around the base of the trees. You can see it starting to grow up on the trunks. So, and we don't want moss underneath these trees. We'll have some grassy areas in the sunlight, but in the shade of the tree we'll just have roots, and we'll top dress the soil probably with sand or something to give it a natural feeling like you're in Africa. So we'll start by pruning away all our moss that's not pruning, picking away all our moss that's growing near the trunks. And if you let moss grow up the trunks, especially on succulents, you'll get rotting because the moss holds the moisture in. So you definitely don't want moss growing up your trunks on succulent trees like these. You want to keep them nice and dry. I'll pick up all this moss and we'll come back when that's all done. Okay, so we've got the moss cleaned up from around the trees. So we've kind of got a pocket of bare soil underneath each tree. The next step, what we're going to do is remove the moss from all the rocks. So they're kind of getting overgrown with moss. You can see this rock here is almost totally covered in moss. So it's getting a little thick. So we're going to pick all the moss off and scrub it up with a toothbrush. I haven't finished cleaning the moss off the rocks yet. I'm still working on it, but I thought I'd better show you what I'm doing. So basically I'm grabbing the moss with the tweezers, and then you can also go in with a brush and brush a lot of the heavy lichen off. It looks nice, the rocks with some natural lichen on them, but as always, too much of a good thing can be bad. So we want to keep everything in moderation. We don't want, heavy moss growing on the rocks, or it won't look arid and desert-like. And we don't want the rocks just to be plain. We want them to, have some character, like there's lichen on them, like they've been there for a long time. So it's kind of a judgment call how much you remove. It's whatever looks good to you. So I'm just trying to get it so it looks more desert-like. Well, eventually I see this as having little tufts of grass here and there, but basically not a lot of grasses. Now, in the rainy season in the desert, you'd get a lot of grasses, but we don't want too much of anything. You can see some of the lichen on the rocks here is quite thick. You can actually, dig clumps of it off. And it'll always grow back. You don't have to worry about if you've removed too much. You don't panic. It grows in fairly quickly with regular waterings of the forest. And same with the moss. It's hard to keep it off in the summer. Okay, so we'll come back when I've finished up the rocks to my liking. Okay, so I've got a lot of the rocks cleaned up. They're down to just like a thin layer of lichen and looking more like rocks that would be out in the sun. So the next step, we want to minimize our moss. To me, it's still looking a little tropical at this point. It's just too lush looking with that green moss everywhere. So I'm going to get some sand. I want to put down a layer of something to cover the rough soil that looks to scale. So sand is a nice covering. It looks miniature and it'll cover up this bonsai soil. So we'll get the sand going and we'll start minimizing the amount of moss in the planting. So it's just, little tufts of grass here and there rather than a lush coating. Okay, so I've got my playground sand, which is just a washed sand, and we're gonna spread it out on the surface. And this sand has a pretty even particle size, so we'll probably want to dress it up with some some of the fine stuff we've sifted out from our turfus or our stay dry, just to break it up so it's not so flat and plain looking, so it gives it a bit of variation in texture and stone size. So we'll do that after. We'll you know, add a few small rocks and stuff to break it up so it doesn't look all the same. And this sand drains well. You don't have to worry about it you know, clogging your soil up too much or anything. So we're just going to go around the areas. We'll start with around the bases of the trees. And then we'll decide how much moss we want to keep in the planting. Again, we're trying to give it that dry desert look, not the tropical rainforest look. So we'll continue applying the sand around the trees, and we'll come back and have a look at it. Okay, so I finished placing the sand around the planting. Let's go and have a look at it. So it's looking pretty close to how I envisioned it. It's looking arid, nice and dry looking landscape. There's some patches of moss still to look like grass. So yeah, I'm happy with it for today. So we'll continue growing the canopies and the branch structure in these trees. Again, they don't look so good yet, but we're working towards getting a nice branch structure and canopy. So the summer's coming. The trees are still inside. I've got about another 20 days before the risk of frost is over. So hopefully it's over. So they have to stay inside for the moment. I can bring them out on nice days and give them some sunshine. And again, be careful transitioning your trees from indoors to outdoors. The sun will just burn the leaves off, so you have to be careful. I don't even like leaving them in the sun this long while I've been working on it, but I'm going to get them back in the shade now. So that's it for today. Nigel Saunders for KW Bonsai. We'll see you next time.